everyone. So today we're running you through a phenomenological analysis. So the goal of this presentation is to take you through, I guess you could say, a step-by-step guide of an analysis when you're doing a phenomenological study. I also want to do this presentation so someone could refer back to this if they are going to take this approach. And also, it's a good way to kind of test my knowledge on an analysis for phenomenology, as I personally haven't done one myself, but I do plan to do one. So I'm sure there'll be mistakes on the way, and it's a learning curve for me. So let's dive into it. So a brief overview of phenomenology. I'm not going to go too much in depth because it's been covered by other groups. Essentially, it was theorized by Edmund Husserl to explain how individuals give meaning to the social phenomenon in their everyday lives. Phenomenology's focus is on the nature of experience from the viewpoint of the person experiencing the phenomenon. So in other words, what is the lived experience of this phenomenon for this person or group if you're looking at a group? Phenomenology is a theoretical framework that attempts to understand the essence of an individual's lived experience. So you're trying to capture the mundane world. So key aspects before the analysis can be done, and these are two critical points that Van Manen touches on. So two critical interrelated conditions need to be met for phenomenological analysis to be successful. If the researcher or inquirer project does not heed these conditions, it is unlikely that phenomenological analysis will be possible. First, make sure your research question is fitting your theoretical framework. For example, your research should be able to capture the lived experiences of the informants. Second, the data that you're working with in your analysis needs to be experience-based material. In other words, the data needs to contain experiential, detailed concreteness, vividness, and lived thoroughness. If the data lacks this, then the analysis will lack the or in other words, it will lack capturing the lived through experience, is what I was trying to get to there. So you've touched on those two critical elements. Now what's next? Just a quick reminder, make sure your research question is a question that covers a human experience. You really want to revert back to that research question. That's the key aspect to this approach. For example, mine is, what are powerlifters' experiences of body image? And you can capture these lived through experiences through the existential themes, live self, other, live body, live time, and live space, which has already been touched upon. Once you've collected your data, you can then begin with two critical steps, epoch A and reduction. So epoch A and reduction are quite important in phenomenology. Epoch A means to refrain from judgment, to abstain from the everyday, ordinary way of perceiving things. The perspective of epoch A and reduction allows the researcher to become aware of personal biases, remove involvement with the subject material, and eliminate presumptions about the phenomenon being studied. So this sets aside your biases as a researcher and lets you dive into the data that's present for you. So what intertwines with this is phenomenological reduction, also known as bracketing the data. It's defined as reviewing the data in the form that is presented to the researcher. The focus of reduction is abstemious. Abstemious in the sense that reflecting on experience must, as much as possible, be open and abstain from the theoretical, polemical, subjectional, and emotional intoxications. This creates an opportunity for the researcher to gain the essence of meaning of the phenomenon. Because if you were just to go into the data set with your preconceived notions, you're going to miss that underlying meaning that the phenomenologist is looking for. We now move into the analysis. What you're going to be doing is a thematic analysis. A thematic analysis for phenomenological study involves revealing the structure of meaning of the lived through experience through text. I guess it could depend on the phenomenological approach you're taking. The Van Manen recommends for generating themes in a three-step approach. Read the transcripts for a whole, I think he called it holistic reading. Select what addresses the phenomenon. Read the transcript with extensive detail. So I'll go over these more in depth. So once you've read the transcript, so he gives a good example here, recommends that once the interview has been transcribed, read the whole text of the interview front and back, and then try to express in one word or phrase what is the meaning or essence of this informant. So themes are generated in phenomenology. How do you generate themes? Sorry. A theme is like the experience of focus, meaning of point. So read over your transcripts, ask what does this mean. Themes simplify all that rich text. You have to kind of dive through all that interview or however you collected your data. Themes are used to capture the phenomenon of interest. So how do themes come about? The theme must make sense to the phenomenological experience. My example, my thesis, capturing male and female powerlifters' body image experiences. So how does the theme relate to the phenomenon? The theme is a mean, it's a pointer to get a notion. The theme is what guides you to the meaning of the experience. This requires you to stay inductive. Open yourself to the data set, the lived experience. So you, your whole goal, mostly phenomenology, is to stay inductive as much as possible. Themes express what cannot be expressed with words and conceptualizes the phenomenon. For example, if I were to ask, what do you experience prior to a 1 RM, 1 repetition max, and then you express it, the performance express it without words, then that's unethical. Also, the theme could be a description existential theme. The theme is to describe what we want to understand. Now, proceeding further with the analysis. So you listen or read the interview several times and then find salient quotes, statements, and phrases. These statements are to be highlighted, circled, or underlined. Refer to these as clusters. Then describe how these phrases or statements explain the lived through experiences. And you have all these clusters, and some people may, I guess you could say cherry pick, but in phenomenology, everything has equal significance, and this is known as horizontalization. Everything is equally important. The clusters that were generated in the previous step then goes through an extensive detailed reading. This involves reading every line of the cluster and ask yourself, what does this line of the lived through experience have to do with the phenomenon of interest? In my example, what does this sentence tell me about the experience of powerlifters and body image? Once you've done that, you can then kind of do something called imaginative variation. This allows you to vary your perspective on the phenomenon. It's almost like your move. This is so the informants said this. Once if it really meant X or Y. So this is your perspective on the meaning of the experience, because it could mean possibly something else. The data then needs to be synthesized of each informant's perception of their experience in their own words, followed by the essence of the group, if you're looking at that, group's experience to allow individuals to be represented as a whole. The whole group is then summarized, which will explain the informant's everyday self-experience. In my thesis, the example would be how powerlifters experience body image prior, during, or post-competition period. Once the essence of the group has been found, I will compare the themes with existing literature. This is just a safe goal. Obviously, you want to be inductive as possible to then provide how the present study adds or creates new themes. Since I'm doing a master's, I'm going to time constraint, so deductive is probably the safe bet here. I'll now touch on rigor. So I'm not going to go too much in depth. There's more aspects to it. I can obviously cover every aspect I touched upon more in detail, but just going through it, I guess, could say a little lightly, like section of rigor. So credibility in a phenomenological study increased through minimizing investigative biases. This is touched on through epoche. So this removes, as this process removes assumptions, prejudices, and myopic thinking. You can also use an expert audit review. So have someone in your committee or someone who's well versed in this theoretical framework to kind of call you. You can show them the analysis, and they can say, "Well, I think you missed this, this, and this." So it kind of calls you on your epoche. There's also transferability, and this is how Van Manen states it: is repeatability of phenomenological study is difficult to achieve because the same event or phenomenon can be different with other informants. He claims that the researcher should strive for new and surprising insights. He's essentially saying, and there's more to this, that everyone is different. It's hard to repeat the study. Everyone has a different experience. And me playing devil's advocate is, as the phenomenologist, you're studying the mundane world. So what someone is experiencing isn't too extreme. It depends on what you're looking at, but what that person's experiencing, others must be experiencing too. I'll go through an example now because that might have been hard to process. And if anyone is just using the audio, I'll read through a transcript that I took from the Van Manen book. Um, as this is a really good example of a lived through experience and how he goes through the analysis. Um, and you can see the master at work, so to speak. So this data is from a lived through experience collected from an adult who was asked about their experiences of secrecy as a child. Okay, this is open quote. I must have been 12 when I hid the bottle of liquor under a firewood stack for a get together some kids were organizing. I had to keep the bottle stashed for 2 days under the wood stack, but I was absolutely terrified at the thought that my parents would discover it. I considered getting rid of it, but how? I remember trying to act normally at home, like nonchalantly, whistling a tune and such, but feeling very self-conscious. I constantly felt that my parents might already know and suddenly confront. I, I had difficulty looking my mother straight in the eyes. I'm sure my father would have killed me if he had discovered the bottle. Toward my mother, I felt guilty and sort of as if I was betraying her. I knew she would have felt disappointed in me if she would have found out. So how might Van Manen go about this? Holistic reading, and I'll go through this quickly just so you can see it in practice. So he reads the lived through experience, the overall theme of the experience in that phrase or word. He comes to the conclusion of we are actually hiding ourselves. Then he does a selective reading. The last sentence, it sticks out to him. It grabs him hits him in the face, so to speak. The informants say found out. What would have their parents found out? He explains, Van Manen, how the experience of secrecy has to do with a sense of self. So it seems like he's touching on an existential theme here. A line by line reading and asking, what does this sentence say about experience of a secret for a child? And I gave four examples of a detailed reading. I, here's from the lived experience. I must have been 12 when I hid the liquor, when I held a bottle of liquor under a firewood stack for a get together some kids were organizing. His conclusion, secrecy of hiding something. Another line, I had to keep the bottle stashed for 2 days under the wood stack, but I was absolutely terrified at the thought that my parents would discover it. His conclusion, secrecy may be experienced as a fear of being found out or discovered. Again, you do that for every line, so you could see um, how difficult, how extensive it could be, and obviously difficult too. You then do a reflective writing. This kind of teases out, it puts it conceptualizes all your data, and I guess you could say one document, something that an outsider can read and capture that lived through experience for that person or possibly a group. Once you move into groups, it gets more difficult because you're now creating something for a whole. So how might Braun and Clark do this? The 5 steps of their thematic analysis. And this I did quite quick because we could talk about this for um, far longer. So I just did this myself quickly. Familiarize yourself with the data. Find things relevant to your research question, kind of similar to Patton's, so that the quotes are from their article. You then generate initial code. So I chose an emotion coding. The line, I'm sure my father would have killed me if he had discovered the bottle. You then search for themes. And I chose this quote from the article. Rather, analysts are like sculptors, making choices about how to shape and craft their piece of stone. And I chose that line because it seems like the authors are choosing their themes, and that's troublesome in the phenomenological study. But the themes that came up were fear, guilt, and ashamed, and you review those themes. So those themes the themes you generated. So one of those three, you could say is that a code or is an actual theme. You go back and forth with yourself. Whereas in phenomenology, you want to it is what is there is what is there, right? You then define the themes. Let the data speak for itself. So you then say this theme is the theme is fear. Provide the narrative. Move on, and that's your thematic analysis. More in depth than that. It's not easy as I just described, but you can see that the themes they do like they're not they don't stay with the people. You're searching. You have to stick with the data. So that's the troublesome doing this approach through a phenomenological lens, of course. So as a wrap up, what to consider for what phenomenology? Themes are generated, they're understood as a structure of experience. This means only looking at themes that contain experiential material, that cover the lived through experience being studied. So you want to leave out the conceptual abstraction that people are theorizing. I think this means this, I think that means that, I feel like this. That's not a lived through experience. Once the themes have been generated, you may have to go back to your chapter one or rewrite the literature review that you did not cover. Or so I think as Maureen recommends, you do your analysis and then you do a posteriori. So you say these themes were found that were not covered in the literature, and then you have to go in depth. As you can see, the con, if you're not fond of writing, is it requires rich descriptions, a lot of writing, because you're sticking with your people. You want to find that experience, and you're not just searching for these themes. You're sticking with your people, looking for the underlying meaning, which could be quite difficult. So that's all I have to say on phenomenology. I hope someone took something away from this. If you have any questions or I move too fast, you can always ask me, send me an email. I hope it made sense. Thank you very much for listening.